So picture this. It's 1845.
Okay.
And a Scottish stage magician named John Henry Anderson is standing on a stage in London, and he does something that genuinely, terrifies the audience.
Oh, the cannon trick.
Yes. He rolls a massive 30-foot artillery cannon out in front of the crowd. I mean, this is a heavy iron weapon of war.
Right, not a prop.
Exactly, a real cannon. And he throws a massive sheet over it, raises his hands, pulls the sheet away, and the cannon is it's completely gone.
Which is insane to think about seeing back then.
People gasped. I mean, some thought he was a literal wizard. Others actually thought he had struck a deal with the devil. But, he wasn't a god and he wasn't a demon.
He's just an engineer, really.
Yeah, he just knew exactly how to angle a massive mirror. And he knew how to fill the stage with just enough ambient smoke to blur the edges of the reflection.
It's brilliant.
It really is. But today, we don't really use mirrors to hide artillery cannons anymore.
No, we use them to hide impending corporate bankruptcies.
Right. Toxic relationships, our own deep-seated insecurities. Because we spend an enormous amount of our waking lives putting on a performance,
Yeah.
just carefully managing exactly what the world is allowed to see.
And it is an incredibly heavy cognitive load to carry. I mean, just think about the sociology of your daily routine. You wake up, you prepare for work, and you aren't just putting on clothes.
You're putting on a persona.
Exactly. You are psychologically donning a very specific mask that's tailored for a specific audience. You walk into a boardroom and you project this aura of absolute unwavering confidence, even if deep down you are completely terrified about the quarterly numbers.
Oh, for sure. Fake it till you make it.
Right. Well, or you're handling a PR crisis and you slip into the mask of, strategic, empathetic diplomacy. Even just sitting in a university lecture hall taking an exam, you are performing competence for the person evaluating you.
It's exhausting just talking about it.
It is. And we construct these facades because, well, evolutionary psychology tells us they are totally necessary for social survival and professional advancement, too.
So we use polite euphemisms.
We obscure our true motives. We heavily curate our image. But the underlying reality, the inescapable truth of human neurobiology here is that the brain just cannot sustain a performance indefinitely.
It takes too much energy.
Way too much. Eventually, that mask has to come off.
And that inevitable unmasking is exactly what we're getting into today. So welcome to the Deep Dive. We are looking at a really remarkable stack of sources today that explore the exact mechanics of what happens when that daily performance just abruptly stops.
It's a fascinating transition to study.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because whether you are navigating a 10-year marriage, a lifelong friendship, or a high-stakes business partnership, where real money is on the line, the absolute foundational bedrock of any genuine connection is unvarnished honesty.
Absolutely.
We spend years in school learning about grammatical fluency, right? Like how to conjugate verbs and structure sentences. But what we are exploring today is arguably much more vital to your actual survival, which is emotional fluency.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to map out the entire spectrum of human emotional intelligence.
From the very bottom to the top.
Right. We're going to track the human experience from the absolute murky depths of intentional deception all the way to the purest, most radical forms of truth and vulnerability.
Okay, let's unpack this. How are we going to do that?
Well, we're going to navigate this spectrum by exploring a breathtaking array of English idioms, because the language we use to articulate our emotional states, it's not accidental.
It didn't just pop out of nowhere.
No, it didn't just materialize out of thin air. It was forged in highly specific, often incredibly dramatic, historical and social contexts.
So we're going on a bit of a historical journey, too.
Very much so. Over the next hour, we'll be dissecting language drawn from, like you mentioned, the velvet-draped stages of 19th century magic shows.
Oh, I love that.
But also from the heavy mud of agricultural fields, the psychological warfare of the poker table, the golden age of maritime piracy, and even the violent spectacle of medieval jousting tournaments.
Wow. Okay. So starting at the very bottom of that spectrum with absolute dissection that feels like the most relatable place for anyone who has ever had to survive the modern corporate world, honestly.
Sadly true.
Let's look at the literal opposite of truth. In life, in business, in romance, you are constantly going to encounter people or even massive multinational corporations who are trying to make a situation look significantly better or more stable than it actually is.
They're desperately trying to hide a messy, chaotic reality behind this highly polished presentation.
Right. And the phrase our sources highlight to describe this specific calculated type of deception is smoke and mirrors.
It is a phenomenal idiom, and as you alluded to with John Henry Anderson, it's entirely rooted in the literal physical theatrics of the Victorian era.
So take us back there. What did that look like?
Okay, to really understand the psychological weight of this phrase, you have to mentally transport yourself back to a grand, gaslit theater in the 19th century.
Okay, I'm there.
You're sitting in the dark, you're surrounded by velvet curtains, you are watching an illusionist. And we aren't talking about, like, sleight of hand card tricks here.
No, these were massive productions.
Massive, expensive, spectacular illusions. The magician waves a hand, and an ethereal, glowing ghost suddenly materializes and just floats right over the orchestra pit.
Which, to an audience in the 1800s, before cinema or special effects, that must have literally short-circuited their brains.
Oh, absolutely. It looked like legitimate dark magic.
But as our sources break down, there was absolutely zero magic involved. It was pure optical engineering. The illusionist, or his crew behind the scenes, was pumping actual thick physical smoke, often from burning chemicals, actually directly onto the stage.
Right, which creates a scream.
Exactly. And hidden in the floorboards of the rafters were these enormous, precisely angled plates of glass and mirrors.
So the smoke obscures the audience's depth perception.
Yep. And the angled mirrors reflect a hidden actor under the stage, projecting their reflection onto the smoke itself so it looks like a floating ghost.
It's incredible. They were literally hiding the physical truth of the room behind smoke and mirrors.
And the way that physical mechanism translates to our modern linguistic application is just brilliant. Idiomatically, when we say a situation is smoke and mirrors today, we obviously aren't talking about stage magic.
No, we're talking about a highly complex explanation or a deluge of confusing data, or just a flashy distraction that is deliberately deployed to hide a fundamental lack of substance.
It's the intentional act of cognitive obscuration.
Exactly. Think about a massive corporate pitch for a tech startup.
No, I've sat through a few of those.
Right. You sit down in the conference room, the presentation is visually stunning, the slides are minimalist and beautiful, the CEO is incredibly charismatic, the revenue projections curve endlessly up and to the right. But then you actually hire an auditor to look at their raw financial data, and the user retention is abysmal. The burn rate is catastrophic.
So the whole thing was a lie.
The entire flashy pitch was just smoke and mirrors. A carefully engineered illusion designed to distract your brain from the reality of their impending bankruptcy.
Wait, I have to push back on that definition for a second, because I could easily hear someone listening to this and thinking, isn't a certain degree of smoke and mirrors just, the cost of doing business or just basic marketing?
It's a common argument.
Think about social media. It's like putting a really nice, warm, cinematic filter on a photo before you post it online to hide the fact that your bedroom is a messy disaster in the background. You're just presenting the most optimized version of yourself.
Sure.
So why is a well-tailored suit or a beautifully designed pitch deck instantly categorized as deception? At what point does a polished presentation actually cross the line into smoke and mirrors?
That is exactly the friction point we need to analyze. Because it is a very fine line, but the distinction lies entirely in the psychological intent. Right. Presentation, putting your best foot forward, highlighting your strengths, wearing the tailored suit is just part of existing in a cooperative society. You clean your living room before guests arrive because you want them to be comfortable.
Right, that's just being polite.
That is social optimization. But smoke and mirrors fundamentally attempts to alter reality. It isn't just highlighting a positive trait, it is actively, maliciously creating a false cognitive map for the other person so they cannot see the truth.
Ah, okay. So it's the difference between cleaning your house versus like renting a mansion for an hour to take photos so you can convince investors you're a millionaire.
Precisely. If you put a filter on a photo to make the lighting look better, that's presentation. If you use generative AI to create a completely fake portfolio of work, and you use that to secure a massive loan.
That is smoke and mirrors.
Exactly. It is fraud masked as competence. And the hallmark of a truly authentic, emotionally intelligent person is how they react when they encounter this.
Because they don't just go along with it.
Right. When they spot the smoke and mirrors, they do not smile and nod. They recognize the cognitive dissonance. They see the glare on the angled mirrors, so to speak. They realize they are being managed, and they outright refuse to accept the illusion.
They demand the raw, unvarnished truth.
Always.
But demanding the truth creates a very specific kind of friction, doesn't it? Because let's face it, society is built to run smoothly on illusions.
Very much so.
So when you refuse to play along with the theatrical magic, you have to use a conversational mechanism that is the total opposite of a delicate illusion. You have to resort to literal linguistic blunt force. You have to, as the saying goes, call a spade a spade.
Yes. And here is where we move entirely away from the velvet line theater of the 19th century and drop right into the heavy dirt of an agricultural field.
A complete different vibe.
Completely. A spade, in its literal sense, is a heavy iron digging shovel. It is heavy, it is covered in mud, it requires backbreaking physical labor to use.
There is absolutely nothing glamorous or magical about a spade.
Nothing at all. It is a tool of brute utility.
And the metaphor is so structurally sound because of the absurdity of the contrast, right? Like if you are standing in a freezing, muddy trench holding this heavy, dirty iron shovel, you don't hold it up to the light and refer to it as an agricultural implement of soil displacement.
You wouldn't, because that is a euphemism. And we need to look at why humans rely so heavily on euphemisms in the first place.
Okay, why do we?
Well, a euphemism is a mild, indirect, or vague word substituted for one considered to be too harsh, blunt, or offensive. Sociologically, euphemisms act as shock absorbers for human interaction.
Oh, I like that term, shock absorbers.
We use them constantly to soften the edges of a harsh reality and avoid triggering negative emotions in others. We say someone passed away instead of saying they died to soften the grief.
Right, or we say a company is downsizing or restructuring instead of saying they are firing 300 people to soften the panic.
Exactly. Euphemisms keep the social gears turning without grinding.
But they also obscure reality.
They do. So when you choose to call a spade, you are actively making the decision to strip away those social shock absorbers. You're refusing to use polite euphemism.
You're just putting it all out there.
You are choosing to speak the absolute, undeniable, unfiltered truth about a situation or a person, regardless of how impolite, awkward, or deeply uncomfortable it might be for everyone in the room to hear.
And our source text gives this painfully accurate example that anyone who has worked in a mid-sized company will immediately recognize the unqualified CEO's son.
Yes, a classic scenario.
You know this the exact dynamic. The boss's kid gets hired straight out of college for a senior management position. Everyone in the office knows within 3 days that he has absolutely no idea what he's doing.
None.
He is blowing past deadlines. He is mismanaging budgets. He is alienating key clients. But because his last name is on the building, the entire office infrastructure relies on euphemisms to survive.
They have to.
All right, people sit in meetings and say, oh, he's just finding his feet, or he has very disruptive, non-traditional management style. Or my personal favorite, he's focusing on high-level strategy right now.
Which is all just participating in a shared delusion to protect their own jobs.
Right. So to call a spade in that environment means you walk into the quarterly review, you look at the board, and you say, look, I know he is the CEO's son, but he is completely unqualified for this position, and he is actively destroying this department.
Wow.
I mean, it is a terrifying level of bluntness. It sucks all the air out of the room.
It is terrifying because, as we established, polite society is built on a foundation of slight omissions, gentle phrasing, and mutual protection.
So you're breaking the social contract.
You are. Delivering the unfiltered truth in a corporate environment disrupts that delicate harmony. It forces everyone to confront the reality they have been working so hard to ignore. But, and this is key, it is entirely necessary if you want to break through the smoke and mirrors and fix a failing system.
But there is a massive risk here. Right? I mean, if you walk around constantly calling a spade, pointing out everyone else's flaws and tearing down their illusions, you just become incredibly antagonistic.
You become the villain of the office, yeah.
Exactly. You can't just demand raw, unfiltered honesty from your colleagues or your partner if you are operating in secret yourself. Demanding truth requires a reciprocal level of vulnerability. You have to be willing to expose your own position.
Which brings us perfectly to the next psychological step on our spectrum. Laying your cards on the table.
Yes, let's get into this one.
So this is where we move from the mud of the fields to the green felt of the poker table. And what's fascinating here is, to really understand this idiom, we have to look at the behavioral economics and game theory inherent in poker.
Okay, lay it on me.
Because poker is not really a game of cards, it is the ultimate game of controlled information and resource management. During a high-stakes card game, Your entire strategy relies on absolute secrecy. You hold your cards physically close to your chest. You tightly control your micro expressions. You maintain a poker face.
You try not to blink too much.
Exactly. You modulate your breathing. You do everything in your biological power to ensure your opponents have zero accurate data about your strategy or the resources you hold. The entire tension of the game, the psychological warfare of it all, exists in the unknown.
You're constantly calculating probabilities based on incomplete information, which is just exhausting.
There.
But then you reach a tipping point in the hand. You realize that the bluffing has gone as far as it can go. So you physically take your hand and you lay all of your cards face up on the center of the table.
Boom.
The instant those cards hit the felt, the game of secrecy instantly evaporates. Everyone can see the mathematical reality of what you have. The tension is gone. There is no more manipulation.
And that physical final action translates into a profoundly powerful idiom for total practical transparency in human relationships. To lay your cards on the table means to completely and voluntarily reveal your true motives, your secret plans, your hidden feelings, or your actual resources to someone else.
It's a choice.
Yes, it is a deliberate, conscious choice to end the performance.
Think about how this applies outside of a casino, though. Imagine a grueling, high-stakes corporate negotiation. Two companies have been locked in a boardroom arguing over a merger contract for like 6 weeks.
Sounds miserable.
Right. Both sides are bluffing aggressively. Both sides are hiding their true bottom line, pretending they have other buyers lined up, pretending they are completely willing to walk away from the table.
The cognitive load on the negotiators is just massive.
But finally, one side decides the game is counterproductive. They slide their folder across the table and say, look, we are laying our cards on the table. Here is our absolute final budget. This is our maximum threshold. We cannot go a single dollar higher, but we want this deal to work. This is the reality.
The psychological relief in that moment, even if it ultimately means the deal falls through because the numbers just don't match, is palpable.
You can just breathe again.
The amygdala, which is the part of the brain responsible for processing fear and threat, can finally stand down. You are stepping out of the exhausting theater of negotiation and into reality. And honestly, it is actually a massive display of confidence and power.
Really? How so?
Voluntary vulnerability is a high-level power move. You are essentially signaling, I am secure enough in my position that I no longer need the protection of an illusion.
Oh, I see. It's an incredibly healthy place to reach. But I want to pivot here because laying your cards on the table is an intentional, voluntary act. You choose the moment. You control the narrative.
Right.
But human nature is volatile. We don't always get the luxury of choosing when our truth is revealed.
We certainly don't.
So what happens when someone is desperately trying to maintain their performance? They are clinging to their smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
But a high-pressure situation completely shatters the illusion against their will.
That is a much messier situation.
In English, the idiom for this sudden, involuntary, and usually ugly revelation is showing your true colors.
And to fully grasp the severity of this phrase, we have to look back at its legendary and frankly violent nautical history.
Okay, I love this part.
We are talking about the golden age of sailing, merchant shipping, and piracy in the 17th and 18th centuries. On the open ocean, before radar or radio communication, a ship's colors referred to the national flag flying from its mast.
That was the only way to know who was out there.
Exactly. It was the only long-distance visual indicator of who was approaching you on the horizon and what their intentions might be.
So, paint the picture for us.
Yeah.
Imagine you are the captain of a Spanish or British merchant ship. Your hull is heavily loaded with valuable cargo, sugar, spices, textile.
Really lucrative stuff.
Very. You look through your spyglass and you see a heavily armed ship approaching fast on the horizon. Naturally, your heart rate spikes. You prepare the cannons, you prepare your men for a fight because piracy is a constant terrifying threat.
Right, you're on high alert.
But as the ship gets closer, the wind catches its flag, and you see they are flying the British Union Jack or the French fleur-de-lis, a friendly, allied nation.
Oh, thank God.
Right. You let out a breath, you lower your defenses, you tell your men to stand down, and you let the ship sail right up alongside your hull to exchange news or trade.
And that sigh of relief was exactly what the pirates were counting on. Because historically, pirate ships would deliberately fly those friendly flags to trick their targets into a false sense of security.
So devious.
It was the ultimate maritime smoke and mirrors, a literal false flag operation. They bypassed the merchant ship's defenses entirely through deception.
Wow.
But the moment they were close enough to throw grappling hooks, the moment the trap was sprung, the pirates would drop the fake national flag down to the deck, and they would haul up their actual flag, the black skull and crossbones, the Jolly Roger.
That is terrifying.
In that terrifying, chaotic instant, they would reveal their true colors.
Wait, so the pirate flag wasn't just like a general intimidation tactic. It was literal, procedural, maritime fraud.
Exactly. It was a calculated psychological weapon. The sudden switch from a polite, friendly facade to the promise of absolute violence was designed to induce instant panic.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because it is such a vivid, visceral image. The sudden drop of the polite mask right before the attack. And it maps so flawlessly to modern human psychology, doesn't it?
Perfectly.
Because in modern behavioral terms, a person's true colors refers to their genuine morals, their deep-seated character, their actual personality beneath the polite, curated mask they wear for society.
Precisely. To show your true colors means to involuntarily reveal who you fundamentally are when the performance fails. And crucially, unlike laying your cards on the table, this idiom is almost exclusively used in a negative context, and it is almost always triggered by sudden stress.
Stress is the trigger.
Stress is the biological mechanism that forces the fake flag to drop.
It's like stress is a biological truth serum.
It really is. Think about the cognitive load we discussed earlier. When the environment is calm, when things are easy and going your way, anyone can afford the mental energy to pretend to be a saint.
Anyone can fly a friendly flag?
Right. But when sudden adversity hits, when a crisis occurs, when money is lost, when embarrassment happens, the brain has to rapidly reallocate resources to deal with the threat. The cognitive load of maintaining that fake, polite persona becomes too heavy.
So it just shuts down.
The mask slips, the prefrontal cortex, which handles social regulation, gets overridden by the stress response, and the baseline character takes over.
And the source material gives an incredibly relatable, everyday example of this that doesn't involve pirates, but is just as revealing.
I love this example.
Imagine you are on a third date. You are at a very nice, crowded restaurant. For the past 2 weeks, your date has been acting incredibly charming. They are polite, they are witty, they're asking you thoughtful questions, they're holding the door, the friendly flag is flying high.
You're thinking, wow, this person is amazing.
Exactly. But then, a tired, clumsy waiter accidentally bumps the table and spills a glass of ice water all over your date's lap.
That is the moment of stress. That is the catalyst that breaks the system.
Right. Now, a person whose baseline character is actually kind might gasp, laugh it off, and tell the waiter not to worry about it. But in this scenario, instead of being understanding, your date's face completely contorts.
Oh, no.
The charm vanishes instantly. They stand up and start viciously screaming at this terrified young waiter, insulting their intelligence, demanding to see a manager, just causing a massive, humiliating scene in the middle of the dining room.
It's awful to watch.
In that split second, the charming mask has dissolved, the black flag is raised, they've shown their true colors. All the charm and the witty banter was just a performance, and the screaming entitled cruelty is their actual fundamental character.
And this is where the psychology gets really fascinating, because once someone has shown their true colors in that manner, your perception of that person is permanently altered.
You can't undo it.
You cannot unsee the black flag. Even if they sit back down, take a breath, and apologize, saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me," you know the truth. The illusion is broken forever.
But let me ask you this. Is showing your true colors always a revelation of a hidden villain? What if the stress strips away a very polite, quiet, timid facade and reveals that someone is actually incredibly brave in a crisis? Does true colors only mean we're secretly terrible?
That's a brilliant distinction, actually. Linguistically, the idiom is heavily weighted toward negative revelations simply because humans have a negativity bias.
Right, we remember the bad stuff.
We remember threats more clearly than pleasant surprises. However, psychologically, stress absolutely can reveal positive true colors. A quiet, unassuming colleague who suddenly takes charge and saves a project during a massive crisis is also showing their true colors.
So their baseline is competence, even if their mask is timid.
Exactly. But regardless of whether the revelation is positive or negative, the aftermath is always disruptive. When secrets are revealed, when the brutal truth is exposed, or when the masks finally slip, it inevitably causes a massive disruption in the social fabric.
Right, the fallout. Which brings us to a critical transition in our emotional journey today. We have moved past the deception of smoke and mirrors. We have demanded truth by calling a spade, The true colors have been revealed, for better or worse. Now what?
Now you have to deal with it.
Exactly. You are left standing in the wreckage of an argument or a revelation. How do we process the fallout and fix the relationship? The idiom we use for this stage of emotional repair is clearing the air.
This is perhaps one of the most deeply sensory, physiological metaphors we have in the English language. It is a meteorological metaphor that maps perfectly onto human neurobiology.
Okay, walk us through it.
I want you to physically imagine the weather right before a massive, violent summer thunderstorm. If you have ever lived in a climate with extreme summer weather, like the American Midwest or parts of Southeast Asia, you know exactly what this feels like on your skin.
Oh, yeah.
The air isn't just hot, it is thick, humid, oppressive. The barometric pressure drops. It feels heavy in your lungs. The sky turns a bruised, dark purple. The birds stop singing. You can physically feel the atmospheric tension in your bones.
Everyone is just waiting, sweating for the storm to finally break.
Exactly.
It is a suffocating feeling. You are just trapped in this
Yeah.
heavy, stagnant atmosphere where nothing can breathe.
Now take that exact physical sensation and map it onto a human relationship. Think about two people who are furious with each other, who have had their true colors exposed, but who haven't actually spoken about it yet.
The silent treatment.
Right. The unsaid anger, the simmering resentment, the secrets it builds up in the physical space between them, just like that summer humidity. It is an oppressive, deeply uncomfortable tension. And just like a real storm front, it ruins the environment for everyone around them. You can walk into a room where two people are harboring secret resentments, and you can literally feel the tension.
Yeah, you can cut the tension with a knife. But then the storm finally breaks. And this is the resolution of the metaphor.
The release.
The thunder cracks, the lightning flashes, and the heavy torrential rain finally falls. It might be loud, it might be chaotic, it might even be a little scary, just like a real heated argument. But look at what happens afterward. The wind blows all of that oppressive humidity away.
The sky clears up.
The sky opens up and turns a crisp, clear blue. The temperature drops 10 degrees. And the atmosphere is left feeling fresh, cool, and perfectly, wonderfully clear.
In the context of our emotional spectrum, clearing the air means finally having that difficult, fiercely honest, and potentially loud conversation to resolve the hidden tension.
You just have to get it out.
It means speaking the unspoken anger, addressing the betrayals, and laying out the misunderstandings. It is the emotional equivalent of a thunderstorm, and neurologically it functions the exact same way.
How so?
Well, when you are holding on to resentment, your body produces a steady drip of cortisol, the stress hormone. You are in a state of chronic, low-level fight or flight. But when you finally speak the truth, when you clear the air and the conflict is resolved, the amygdala deactivates.
So your body actually calms down.
The parasympathetic nervous system engages. Your heart rate drops. You literally, physically feel lighter, just like the air after a storm.
The source material uses this example of two project managers who haven't spoken properly in a month because of some lingering, bitter resentment over how a project was handled.
Yeah.
They're just emailing cold, one-word replies to each other.
And that tension is destroying the whole team's morale, right?
Totally. Nobody wants to be in meetings with them. They need to go get a cup of coffee, sit down, and clear the air. They need to let the storm happen. They need to hash it out, raise their voices if they have to, and get it all on the table so the relationship can be healthy and breathe again.
Because you cannot just ignore the humidity and hope it magically dissipates. Avoidance does not clear the air. It just breeds a more violent storm later. You have to let the rain fall.
And what is so beautiful about this progression we are tracking is what happens after the storm. Once the air is finally cleared, once the deception is gone, the masks are off, and the truth is out in the open, the relationship doesn't just return to the status quo.
No, it evolves.
It actually evolves. It can move into a space of profound, radical, emotional vulnerability because you know the other person won't break under the pressure of the truth.
We are entering the territory of true, unfiltered authenticity now. An authentic person, someone who has mastered this level of emotional fluency and survived the storms, is no longer afraid of their own neurochemistry.
They aren't hiding.
They do not feel the need to hide behind a poker face or maintain a stoic, detached facade. They are willing to wear their heart on their sleeve.
Now, I absolutely love the imagery of this one, but I have to admit some confusion, and I need you to explain the historical roots, because it sounds a bit anatomically strange on the surface. Why a sleeve? Where does this specific phrasing come from?
It is a wonderful piece of history. It originates from medieval romance and the grand, visceral spectacle of jousting tournaments.
Oh, like knights on horseback.
Exactly. In the Middle Ages, during these massive sporting events, a knight would ride out into the list in full plate armor. He is encased in steel, completely protected, completely anonymous.
Right.
But to show his devotion to a specific woman, often a lady of the court whom he loved or admired, he would literally take a bright ribbon or a piece of cloth that belonged to her and tie it around his arm. He would tie it around his armored sleeve.
So it was a physical, brightly colored marker of his internal emotion, tied to the outside of his defense mechanisms.
Exactly. He was publicly, visibly declaring his devotion for the entire stadium, including his opponents, to see cheer. He wasn't hiding his feelings of love away in his chest, locked safely behind a steel ribcage of armor.
He's putting it out there.
He was literally wearing his heart represented by the lady's ribbon on his sleeve for everyone to witness, even as he rode into violent battle. It was a statement that his emotion was stronger than his need for protection.
Okay, but let me push back on how this applies today.
Yeah.
Because that sounds noble for a knight in the Middle Ages, sure. But we live in a modern world that is utterly obsessed with curating a tough, untouchable image.
We do.
Especially online, the dominant aesthetic is being unbothered. Everyone wants to seem stoic, completely in control, emotionally detached, and immune to criticism.
It's the modern armor.
Exactly. In today's highly judgmental, hyper-connected society, isn't wearing your heart on your sleeve a massive, almost reckless psychological risk? You are essentially walking around unable to hide your sadness, your joy, your insecurities. You are a completely open target for trolls, manipulators, or just careless people.
It is an incredible risk. You are entirely correct. But that is precisely why it is the ultimate hallmark of an authentic person. The stoic, unbothered facade that is so popular today is, more often than not, just another modern form of smoke and mirrors.
Oh, wow. I didn't think of it that way.
It is a defense mechanism designed to prevent people from seeing that you are actually terrified of being hurt. To wear your heart on your sleeve today means you make the conscious choice to let your deepest emotions be completely visible and obvious to everyone around you.
So you cry when you're moved by a piece of music.
Yes. You laugh loudly and unapologetically when you are joyful. You show your devastation when you are hurt. You refuse to expend the massive cognitive energy required to hide your humanity.
So the vulnerability isn't a weakness. The vulnerability is the proof of strength. You are saying, I am strong enough to survive you seeing me cry.
Exactly. The source material uses the example of a brilliant stage actress. Why is she considered brilliant? Why does the audience connect with her so deeply?
Because she's real.
Because she wears her heart on her sleeve in every single scene. She doesn't hold back. She allows the audience complete, unfiltered access to her emotional state. It requires immense bravery to be that exposed, because you are handing people the ammunition to judge you and trusting that the connection you build will be worth the risk.
And if wearing your heart on your sleeve is being exposed to the crowd, the next idiom takes it to the absolute ultimate extreme of intimacy between two people. We move from just showing your emotions on the surface to completely baring your soul.
This is the deepest end of the human emotional spectrum. Let's analyze the literal etymology of the words here. The word bare, spelled B-A-R-E, means naked.
Uncovered.
It means completely uncovered, stripped of all armor, entirely exposed to the elements. And your soul, in this context, represents the very core of your psychological being. It holds your deepest, most shameful regrets, your darkest fears, your most private, unspoken thoughts, and the fundamental, unvarnished truth of who you are when nobody is watching.
So when you combine those concepts, you are talking about the ultimate act of psychological nudity. You are taking off all of your emotional armor. You aren't just showing someone that you are sad, which is wearing your heart on your sleeve. You are explaining the foundational childhood trauma that makes you sad.
Exactly.
The example from the sources is incredibly poignant. It describes two people sitting on a quiet porch at 2 a.m., just looking at the stars in the quiet of the night, and finally confessing their deepest childhood traumas, their greatest failures to one another.
That image of the quiet, dark porch is so vital to understanding the idiom. You cannot bare your soul in a crowded room or in a corporate boardroom or during a chaotic PR crisis.
No, you need safety.
It requires a setting of absolute implicit safety and trust. When you bare your soul, you are handing the other person the most fragile, destructible pieces of your identity with the full, terrifying knowledge that they could use that information to absolutely destroy you.
And you just have to trust that they won't.
And you are doing it because you trust that they won't. Bearing your soul is the culmination of the journey of authenticity. It is the reward you get for doing the hard work, for cutting through the deception, for calling a spade, for surviving the thunderstorm of clearing the air. You finally reach a sanctuary where you can be entirely nakedly yourself with another human being.
And walking this path, committing to this terrifying level of emotional honesty, it actually yields an incredible return on investment. It grants you something that feels like a literal superpower in your day-to-day life.
It does. When you do the deep, difficult work of navigating your own internal emotional spectrum, the superpower you unlock is empathy. Profound, piercing, high-resolution empathy.
Right. Because once you have navigated this entire spectrum, once you know intimately what it feels like to bare your soul, and you know what the heavy barometric tension of clearing the air feels like in your own chest, you become incredibly acutely attuned to those same emotional states in others.
Which brings us to the final idiom in our deep dive, the result of all this work. Reading someone like a book.
Okay, I use this one all the time.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a beautiful, quiet, literary metaphor to close our turbulent journey. Think about the physical object of a book. A closed book sitting on a table is a mystery.
You don't know what's inside.
It contains secrets, hidden plots, concealed character motivations. You have absolutely no idea what is happening inside it just by looking at the leather cover. For most people, other human beings are closed books.
But open book.
An open book is effortless to decode. The words are printed clearly in stark black ink on white paper right there on the page. There is no ambiguity.
So when you have developed this extreme level of emotional intelligence, people stop being closed books to you. You can read them like an open book. You can instantly recognize the lies because you know exactly how the smoke and mirrors are engineered.
You've seen them before.
Exactly. You can effortlessly understand their hidden emotions and predict their behavior, even when they are trying desperately to hide it behind a carefully constructed poker face.
The source material gives a fantastic example of this empathy loop in action. Imagine a colleague who just found out they lost a major career-defining promotion.
Brutal.
They are walking around the office smiling, making jokes, telling everyone they are fine, pretending they aren't completely crushed. To a surface-level observer, to someone who takes the performance at face value, they look perfectly okay.
Or flying the friendly flag.
Exactly. But to you, someone who understands human vulnerability and the weight of the masks we wear, you can see right through the performance. You've known them for years. You see the subtle micromuscular tension in their jaw.
You hear the slight change in their voice.
You hear the slight half-octave change in their tone of voice. You notice they're avoiding eye contact. You can read them like a book. You know they are devastated.
And you know what to do about it.
Because you can read that truth, you know exactly how to approach them with grace and offer genuine support rather than toxic positivity.
So what does this all mean? Which perfectly encapsulates why this matters. Mastering these concepts, really internalizing the neurobiology and the history behind these idioms, it doesn't just make you a master of English vocabulary.
It's much deeper than that.
It doesn't just help you sound smart at a dinner party. It fundamentally transforms you into a master of human connection. It gives you the specific tools required to dismantle the theatrical deception in your life, survive the inevitable storms, and build relationships based on radical, unbreakable trust.
It truly has been an incredible journey today. We have traveled all the way from the theatrical deception and the literal chemical smoke and mirrors of a 19th century magician's stage through the heavy, muddy reality of calling a spade,
Navigating the high stakes, stressful tension of pirates showing their true colors.
surviving the barometric thunderstorm of clearing the air, and finally arriving at the absolute quiet purity of bearing one's soul on a starlit porch.
It really maps out the entire arc of the human experience. The exhausting lengths we go to hide from each other to protect ourselves, and the profound, life-changing beauty of what happens when we finally find the courage to stop hiding.
It does. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to deeply mull over. We have talked extensively today about how stress forces people to drop their false flags and show their true colors.
Right.
We've talked about how bearing your soul requires the ultimate level of trust, the complete removal of your emotional armor. But ask yourself this. When you look back at your own life and your day-to-day interactions with your family or your colleagues, do you naturally tend to wear your heart on your sleeve, embracing the risk of that vulnerability? Or do you instinctively keep your heavy emotional armor strapped on tight, hiding behind a poker face?
It's a tough question.
And perhaps more importantly, the next time that unspoken tension builds up in your life, heavy and oppressive in your chest like a humid summer storm, will you have the courage to sit down, lay your cards on the table, and finally clear the air?
That is a profound question to take with you. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the performances you see around you, keep demanding the truth from yourself and others, and keep exploring the hidden depths of the information you encounter every single day. We will see you next time. So I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine just walking up to a complete stranger, handing them a loaded weapon, pointing it directly at your own chest,
Yeah.
and just simply hoping they decide not to pull the trigger.
Right. It's a terrifying visual.
It's completely terrifying.
Yeah.
But according to this really advanced linguistic analysis we have sitting in front of us today, that insane scenario is the exact psychological mechanism you are engaging in every single time you choose to trust someone.
You're literally handing over the power for your own destruction.
Which is just, it's a heavy way to start, but that's exactly what we're getting into. So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to totally unpack what the sources call the architecture of trust. We're going to take a masterclass on these advanced English idioms of connection because, whether you're trying to figure out a bizarre dynamic with your new manager at work or you're evaluating a romantic partner, this linguistic roadmap applies directly to you.
It really does. And the source material is, honestly, it's brutally uncompromising about this from the very first page.
Yeah.
The foundational thesis of this entire breakdown is that bared souls come with extreme tangible danger.
Wow, bared souls.
Yeah, because when we move out of the realm of clinical observable facts, like, say, looking at a broken arm on an X-ray, and we step into the landscape of human connection, we are entering a zone of massive vulnerability. The text argues that relationships are not this, free-for-all of open-hearted sharing.
Right, like we like to think they are.
Exactly. We romanticize it. But the text says they are a highly calculated, often exhausting process of risk assessment.
Which fundamentally changes how we need to look at the words we use.
Yeah.
Because if I break my arm, the doctor uses precise, sterile terminology. They say, you have a fractured radius.
Right. Very clean.
Clean.
Yeah.
Scientific. But when we try to describe the terrifying architecture of trust, or like the absolute devastation of betrayal, our clinical vocabulary just completely fails us.
It falls apart entirely.
Right. I don't walk around saying, my emotional vulnerability metric is currently operating at 75% capacity.
Right. You can't use sterile words because the experience itself isn't sterile.
No, not at all.
The text points out that we are forced to rely on highly visceral physical imagery from the real world just to map out this invisible emotional territory.
Yeah, we have to borrow words from other places.
Exactly. We take concepts from medieval topography, from nautical disasters, from hand-to-hand combat, and we repurpose them to describe the mechanics of human connection.
And that is exactly what we are mapping out today. We are charting the entire emotional journey from that very first moment you meet someone, all the way to the deepest, most frictionless levels of loyalty. And it all starts, according to the sources, in a state of active defense.
Yes, the defensive perimeter.
Right. Before trust can even be a consideration, your primary objective is protection from what the text calls smoke and mirrors.
Because you need to observe reality before you hand over any of that power we talked about.
Which brings us to the very first idiom in this defensive perimeter, which is keeping someone at arm's length. It is, but I want to push back on this a little bit right out of the gate.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, because when I visualize the literal action of this phrase, it feels inherently contradictory to how we're actually supposed to behave in society.
How do you mean? Like, physically?
Yeah, think about the actual physics of the metaphor.
Yeah.
Let's say a new colleague comes in for a warm, friendly hug, right? Mm-hmm. And you just lock your elbow, put your arm completely straight out, and place your flat palm squarely on their chest.
Just a stiff arm.
A total stiff arm. If I do that by the coffee machine at the office, I'm not going to be seen as cautious. People are going to think I'm incredibly hostile. So how does the source reconcile this need for a defensive perimeter with the basic social requirement to, actually be polite and friendly?
That's a great question. And the linguistic breakdown actually addresses that exact friction. The brilliance of this specific idiom lies in its duality.
Okay. Duality how?
Well, look at the literal physical action. The locked
Yeah.
arm allows the other person to remain in your immediate physical orbit.
Right. You're not running away.
Exactly. You aren't retreating. You aren't pushing them aggressively backward across the room. You are simply defining the absolute limit of their approach.
Ah, okay.
So translating that to the emotional realm, the text suggests this is exactly how we navigate early interactions. You can make that pleasant small talk by the coffee machine. You can be entirely polite and engaging and funny, but you are intentionally holding back your authentic self.
You're putting on a good face, but the core is hidden.
Right. Your core remains protected by that invisible locked arm.
So the friendliness, the politeness, that's all happening at the fingertips.
Yes.
But the vital organs are being kept safely out of reach.
The text describes it as maintaining a very specific, deliberate perimeter. You are controlling the emotional distance while you continue to gather data on their character.
They're watching them.
Exactly.
Yes.
You are observing how they treat other people, how they handle stress, whether their words actually align with their actions.
I mean, I definitely understand the utility of it, but let's take this physical thought experiment just a step further. If you ask anyone to physically walk around all day with their arm locked straight out in front of them.
Oh, it would be awful.
Right. Their deltoid and their bicep are going to be burning in minutes. Eventually, your muscles are going to fail.
Yeah.
You physically can't do it.
No, you can't.
So doesn't this imply that maintaining emotional distance is just this state of constant, unsustainable psychological fatigue?
It absolutely does. And the source material leans heavily into the concept of cognitive load here.
Cognitive load.
Yeah. Maintaining an artificial boundary, constantly monitoring what you say, censoring your natural reactions, analyzing the other person's motives in real time, that requires immense psychological vigilance.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It is. It is an active, calorie-burning state of defense. You simply cannot rest while your arm is extended.
Which means that posture inherently demands a resolution, right? Like you can't stay in the defensive perimeter forever. You'd burn out.
The fatigue literally forces a decision. If the person fails your observation phase, say they reveal themselves to be manipulative or just unkind, you push them away entirely.
You just end the interaction.
Right. But if they prove their character over time, the text notes this biological and psychological shift. The muscles begin to relax. The arm slowly lowers.
Which is the perfect transition.
Yeah.
That physical exhaustion drives us into the next phase of the relationship. The arm drops, and we make this conscious, terrifying choice to alter our posture.
Which brings us to the next intensely physical idiom.
Letting your guard down.
Right. We move away from the image, the rejected hug, and we step directly into a combat arena.
Yeah, I'm picturing this like a boxing ring, or even like a medieval gladiator fight. Your guard isn't just a passive boundary like the stiff arm.
No, it's active defense.
Right. It's your raised fists tucked tightly against your cheekbones, or it's this heavy wooden shield pulled all the way up to cover your chest. The entire physical posture is braced for an incoming strike.
And the psychology embedded in this idiom is all about anticipation. When your guard is up, your sympathetic nervous system is fully engaged.
Utter flight.
Exactly. You are operating under the core assumption that an attack is imminent.
But I mean, dropping a shield seems almost suicidal in a combat scenario.
It does.
If I let my guard down, I mean, I might still be able to dodge, but the source material really implies a state of total paralyzed vulnerability. I struggle a bit with the absolute nature of this transition. Like, why would anyone ever do it?
The key difference the linguistic analysis highlights here is the element of conscious choice.
Okay.
You aren't dropping your guard because you are defeated or because you're too weak to hold the shield anymore. You are dropping it because you are choosing to override your own biological survival instinct.
No.
You are willfully exposing the most vital targets, the face and the heart, based entirely on a calculated belief that the other person will simply choose not to strike you.
The text provides this deeply raw example that really brings this to life. It talks about a woman who has been dating a new partner for months. And for all that time, she has her walls up.
Her fists are raised, emotionally speaking.
Right. Her fists are raised. She's keeping the conversation light. She's deflecting. She's protecting her history. But finally, that fatigue we talk about sets in. The trust metrics seem to align, and she lets her guard down to share this highly traumatic story from her childhood.
She reveals the unprotected core.
Just think about the neurological whiplash of that moment. You're sitting across from someone at a restaurant or on a couch, and you deliberately silence the alarm bells in your head.
It's so hard to do.
It is. You hand them a delicate, fragile piece of your identity. You are basically saying, hey, if you throw a punch right now, if you judge me or if you mock me, it will absolutely destroy me, but I am betting everything that you won't.
It is the ultimate paradox of relaxing into danger. The relief of putting the heavy shield down is immense.
The muscles can finally rest.
But it's immediately followed by the stark, cold terror of exposure.
And this is exactly where the source material charts a really fascinating, almost jarring shift. Up to this point, we have been entirely grounded in the physical world.
Very tangible things.
Right. Locked elbows, raised fists, heavy shields, things we can control, things we can physically observe. But once that guard is down, the mechanics of crossing the final threshold into true trust, they abandon the physical world entirely. We move into something completely unscientific.
We move from calculating risk to embracing the existential void.
To make that final jump, the text says we must take a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, I find this part of the analysis genuinely confusing.
How so?
Well, we're told in the beginning that relationships are all about careful risk assessment and observing behavior, right?
Right. Gathering data.
We are supposed to be calculated. But then the text turns around and says, ultimate trust requires a completely blind leap in the dark. How can you be calculated and leap blindly at the exact same time? Those concepts seem mutually exclusive to me.
It's a brilliant tension in the text, actually, and it comes down to the fundamental limitations of human epistemology.
Okay, break that down for me.
The source argues that you can calculate risk up to a certain percentage, right? You can watch them, you can test them, but you can never, ever reach 100% certainty.
There's always a margin of error.
Always. There is no mathematical formula, no behavioral observation that can definitively guarantee another human being won't betray you in the future.
Because humans are volatile. People change. Circumstances change.
Precisely. You calculate the data until you reach the threshold of the unknown. And at that edge, evidence fails. The visual imagery the text assigns to this idiom is just profound. You are standing on the jagged lip of a massive pitch-black chasm.
Like staring into a canyon at midnight.
Exactly. You cannot see the bottom. You cannot see the landing pad on the other side. Every single evolutionary instinct screams at you to step back from the ledge.
Yet you bend your knees and you launch yourself into the void anyway.
Because trust, at its highest iteration, is defined by this text as action in the absence of evidence.
Action in the absence of evidence.
You cannot prove they will catch you. You simply have to jump.
The source illustrates this with a corporate scenario that I think really brings the terror of the leap into focus.
Oh, the CEO example.
Yes, a CEO needs to hire a new senior manager. Now, the logical, calculated move is to hire someone with a massive resume and a decade of proven success.
The safe bet.
That's safe bet. But instead, the CEO chooses to hire a completely inexperienced candidate based purely on an intuitive belief in their character.
The CEO is abandoning the safety of data entirely.
There's no track record. The data literally does not exist to support the decision. So the CEO is jumping over a corporate chasm, trusting that the raw character of this candidate will just magically manifest into competence under pressure.
It's a huge leap.
It is. And when you apply this lens to your own life, and I really want you listening to chew on this for a second, every single major life milestone demands this exact same unscientific surrender.
It's so true. You cannot innovate. You cannot truly commit without stepping off the ledge.
Think about it. Choosing a career path when you're 18 years old.
Right.
Packing up your apartment and moving to a new city where you know absolutely no one.
Terrifying.
Or saying, I do, at a wedding altar. You cannot possibly see the bottom of any of those chasms.
No.
You just have to surrender to the jump.
Because standing safely on the edge of the cliff guarantees you will never reach the other side. The only way forward is through the void.
But, and this is a big but, the void is indifferent. And we have to look at the incredibly harsh reality presented in the second half of this linguistic breakdown.
It gets dark here.
It does. You take the leap of faith, you abandon your armor, you jump into the pitch black air, and you expect the other person to catch you. But sometimes, they just don't. Sometimes the ground simply isn't there.
The emotional landscape is a place of profound loyalty, yes, but the text is clear that it's also a landscape of devastating, catastrophic betrayal.
And the idioms we use to describe what happens when that jump fails are arguably even more visceral than the ones we use to describe trust.
They really are.
The first idiom of betrayal we encounter is this terrifying nautical disaster, leaving someone high and dry.
The imagery here completely shifts away from combat and focuses entirely on the physics of sudden environmental collapse.
Let me paint the physical picture the text outlines here because it's so vivid. Imagine a massive wooden sailing ship, like maybe from the 18th century. We're talking about a vessel that weighs hundreds and hundreds of tons.
A galleon.
Exactly. Now, at high tide, the water is deep, and this colossal ship is floating perfectly. The physics of buoyancy are working exactly as they should. The ship is powerful, it's mobile, and it's supported entirely by the environment around it.
It is functioning exactly as designed, existing in a state of perfect equilibrium.
But then, rapidly, and without any warning whatsoever, the tide rushes out. The water just completely vanishes.
And the ship can't float in air.
No. Gravity takes over instantly, and hundreds of tons of wood crash down onto the sand. The ship is left high up on the beach, entirely dry.
And a ship on dry sand is fundamentally stripped of its purpose. It's no longer a vehicle. It becomes a prison of its own weight.
So applying this to the psychology of betrayal, the text focuses heavily on the concept of resource withdrawal. When someone leaves you high and dry, they are the vanishing water.
What?
They are taking their financial support, their emotional backing, their physical presence, and they're just evaporating.
Leaving you completely stranded in an environment you cannot possibly navigate alone.
The source uses a brutal example from the startup world to illustrate this. Two business partners have been grinding for years.
Building the ship.
Yeah. The equilibrium is perfect. They are exactly 1 week away from a massive product launch. They have an expensive office lease. They have employees expecting paychecks, media commitments lined up.
They're at high tide.
High tide. But in the middle of the night, one partner drains the corporate bank accounts and just disappears.
The tide has rushed out, leaving the remaining partner crushed under the entire operational weight of the company.
And it's the paralysis that really stands out to me here. When you are left high and dry, you aren't actively being attacked by an enemy,
Yeah.
There's no one swinging a sword at you. You are just immobilized.
Yeah.
You cannot move forward. You cannot move backward. The sheer neurological shock of looking around and realizing the foundational support system has just vanished.
Yeah.
It must be staggering.
The text actually categorizes this as a passive environmental betrayal. The betrayer doesn't even have to strike a blow. They simply remove themselves and let the circumstances destroy you.
Which provides a really stark contrast to our next idiom. If high and dry is a slow, crushing paralysis, the idiom of pulling the rug out from under someone is a violent, kinetic shock.
The mechanics of the trauma here are entirely different.
They are. The linguistic text notes that this idiom often evokes a slapstick comedy visual.
Like a cartoon.
Right. You picture someone standing comfortably in this elegant living room, holding a delicate cup of tea, right in the center of a nice area rug. And someone sneaks up behind them, grabs the edge of the fabric, and yanks it with incredible force. The person flies up into the air, the tea goes everywhere, and they crash down onto the floor.
And in a cartoon, the audience laughs.
Right, it's funny.
Like, huh?
But the text argues we shouldn't view it as slapstick when it's applied to human emotion, and I completely agree with that. The reality of having the rug pulled out is psychological whiplash.
It's instant.
Your brain does not even have the necessary milliseconds to register that gravity is taken over before your spine hits the hardwood.
It is the trauma of instant malicious destabilization.
I really want to dig into the distinction the source material makes between these two types of betrayal, because I think it's important. How do we separate the stranded ship from the pulled rug? Because in both scenarios, your plans collapse.
They do, but the separation lies in the presence of active malice versus passive abandonment. When you are left high and dry, the water simply recedes. It is an absence. But pulling the rug is an aggressive, direct attack on a foundation that you were explicitly invited to stand on.
That's the key right there. Someone provided that rug, they laid it out, and they told you it was solid.
Exactly. They manufactured the safety specifically so they could weaponize it against you.
Huh.
The source uses the example of a university, which I think is heartbreaking.
Oh, that one was tough to read.
Imagine a student from a low-income family who is offered a full-ride academic scholarship.
Right.
She turns down all her other colleges. She plans her entire financial future around this promise. She signs a lease on an apartment near campus. She is standing firmly on the rug.
She did everything right.
She did. And then, 3 weeks before the semester starts, the university administration sends a brief email revoking the funding due to some bureaucratic error.
They yanked the rug with massive force. The floor literally drops out from beneath her reality.
And it just really amplifies the sheer terror of taking that initial leap of faith we discussed earlier.
It does. because we are willingly handing people the architectural blueprints to our lives, trusting that they won't use them to find the load-bearing walls and demolish us.
Which is exactly why the text spends so much time on the arm's length phase in the beginning. The evaluation of character is the only meager defense we have against the rug being pulled.
But, and this is crucial, the source material refuses to leave us in the wreckage.
Thank goodness.
Right. The entire purpose of this linguistic mapping is to show us that when you execute the evaluation correctly, when you take the leap and you find the people who actually catch you in the dark, the architecture you build together is basically indestructible.
We transition from the mechanics of betrayal to the ultimate rewards of vulnerability.
Yes. And to map this out, the text pulls an idiom from incredibly deep in history.
Yeah.
To describe unshakable loyalty, we say, someone stays with us through thick and thin.
Right.
Now, I have to say, before reading this analysis, I always subconsciously associated this phrase with weight, or maybe like the thickness of ice or material.
Most modern speakers do. It's a very common misconception.
But it's not about weight at all.
No, the etymology traces all the way back to the 14th century English countryside. It is a topographical metaphor entirely divorced from weight.
It's about traversing a vast, unmapped medieval forest.
Exactly. Put yourself in the shoes of a traveler hundreds of years ago. When you are walking on a trail and the trees are widely spaced, the sunlight is hitting the ground, and your footing is secure. The locals referred to that as the thin parts of the wood.
So the journey is easy, it's pleasant, it's highly visible.
Anyone would happily walk with you through the thin woods.
Right, because it requires absolutely no sacrifice to be a companion in the sunlight.
But forests are wild, and eventually the path disappears into the thick brush.
The thicket, the dense, overgrown
The
nightmare.
light vanishes. The path is choked with tangled vines, heavy undergrowth, thorns, and hidden predators. Pushing your way through the thick brush is physically agonizing and psychologically terrifying.
And when I look at this, I wonder, why would anyone willingly choose to follow someone into the thick brush?
It defies logic.
It really does. The sociology implied by this idiom is profound. Because if a relationship is just about risk assessment, as the text claimed earlier, the logical move when the path gets thorny is to abandon your partner and go find an easier trail.
But that is exactly why this phrase represents the pinnacle of loyalty. A vow to stay through thick and thin is an act of rebellion against self-preservation. It is a declaration that the bond itself is more valuable than personal safety.
The text highlights a couple who has been married for 50 years. And when you look at a 50-year timeline, it is statistically impossible for it to just be a walk in the thin woods.
Life guarantees you will eventually be forced into the thorns.
The source lists the realities this specific couple faced. We're talking massive financial crises, the stress of international relocations, severe life-threatening illnesses.
Yes, heavy stuff.
But they stayed. They hacked their way through the tangled, disastrous times of life together. They never abandoned each other to the dark.
Shared suffering becomes the mortar in the architecture of trust. Surviving the thick brush together creates a bond that the thin woods could never, ever generate.
Which naturally leads to the big question. How do you identify someone who possesses that level of loyalty before you enter the forest?
Right. How do you know who to take with you?
The linguistic breakdown suggests you look for a kindred spirit.
A phrase that carries almost magical connotations in modern English, but actually has very grounded etymological roots.
Let's pull the words apart because the literal meaning is stunning. First, kindred.
So kindred is an ancient term denoting your family, your tribe, your direct blood relations. It signifies the people to whom you inherently belong.
Okay, and spirit in this context does not mean a ghost.
No.
It refers to your soul, your inner essence, the fundamental core of your identity.
So when you combine them into kindred spirits, you're articulating a belief that two individual souls were somehow cut from the exact same familial cloth.
And our sources describe the experience of meeting a kindred spirit as this instant, frictionless recognition of shared reality.
Frictionless is the perfect word.
It's the sudden cognitive relief of not having to translate yourself.
Remember that cognitive load we discussed earlier? The exhaustion of keeping someone at arm's length?
Yeah, the burning muscle.
Right. When you meet a kindred spirit, that load drops to absolute zero.
The text provides a beautifully quiet example to illustrate this. Picture two fiercely independent, highly introverted people.
Okay.
They happen to meet at a loud, chaotic party. And within 10 minutes of conversation, they discover a mutual, passionate love for 19th century Russian literature.
Very specific.
Very specific. And furthermore, they both admit they would rather spend 5 hours sitting in absolute silence in a corner coffee shop reading than be at the loud party they are currently attending.
In that specific shared passion, the recognition is instantaneous.
Right. They don't have to spend 45 minutes defending their preference for silence to each other.
They don't have to justify why they aren't drinking or dancing.
Exactly. The other person fundamentally understands it at a cellular level because their brain operates on the exact same foundational assumptions.
Which brings us to the final culminating idiom in this linguistic masterclass.
The peak of the mountain.
When you locate that kindred spirit, and you survive the thick and thin together, you arrive at a state of communication where you are completely on the same wavelength.
I find it so striking that we end this long journey with a metaphor drawn directly from modern physics and radio broadcasting.
It's quite a leap from medieval forests.
We leave behind the forests, the gladiator arenas, the sailing ships, and we step into the invisible, immediate realm of electromagnetic frequencies.
It perfectly mirrors the evolution of trust. As trust deepens, the physical barriers dissolve and connection becomes almost invisible.
Now, we don't need to give a textbook lecture on how a radio dial works, but the text makes a brilliant point about cognitive resonance here. Think about a massive transmission tower broadcasting a complex symphony at exactly 99.5 FM.
Right.
If your receiver in your car is tuned to 99.1, you are fundamentally misaligned. The airwaves are just filled with hissing, chaotic static.
You are experiencing the friction of incompatibility. The data is there, in the air, but you cannot decode it.
But when you adjust the dial and align perfectly with 99.5 FM, the static evaporates. The music comes through with pristine, crystal-clear fidelity. Synthesizing this with everything we've explored today, this idiom represents the absolute holy grail of human communication.
It is the eradication of misunderstanding.
Think about the contrast. We began this journey with the ultimate friction, holding a locked arm against someone's chest to keep them away.
That is pure, exhausting static.
Pure static. But when you're on the same wavelength, you anticipate the other person's thoughts before they even articulate them.
The neurological mirroring is so precise that you no longer have to burn any calories predicting their behavior.
The text uses a corporate example that anyone who has ever worked in an office will definitely appreciate. It describes a high-stakes project that moves at lightning speed because the software engineers and the graphic designers are completely on the same wavelength.
Which, honestly, in the corporate world is practically a miracle.
It really is, because engineers and designers usually speak entirely different languages.
They are tuned to different frequencies.
Yeah, arguing over every single pixel and line of code. But when they sync up, when the dial hits that perfect frequency, they don't need endless defensive meetings. They implicitly understand this shared objective. The music comes through clearly, and the work just becomes effortless.
The trust is so deeply embedded that the need for constant verbal negotiations simply vanishes.
It is a breathtaking place to arrive at, especially considering we started in a defensive crouch, bracing for a punch to the face.
It is a complete architectural transformation.
It truly is. I want to briefly trace the arc of this incredible emotional map we've unrolled today. We started by examining the taxing, calorie-burning necessity of maintaining our defensive perimeter, keeping the world at arm's length while we observe the smoke and mirrors.
Waiting for the biological cue that it is finally safe to lower the arm.
We looked at the terrifying psychological shift of letting our guard down, exposing the heart to a potential strike. We stood on the jagged edge of the existential void, analyzing why ultimate trust requires an unscientific leap of faith in the dark.
We embraced the necessity of acting without proof.
We confronted the brutal mechanics of failure, unpacking the paralysis of a stranded ship left high and dry, and the violent kinetic trauma of having the rug pulled out from under our carefully laid plans.
The harsh reality that the blueprints of trust can always be weaponized.
But we pushed through the dark. We walked into the 14th century forest to uncover the profound, sacrificial loyalty required to survive the thick and the thin. We decoded the familial soul recognition of a kindred spirit, and finally we tuned our dials until the static disappeared entirely, finding perfect resonance on the same wavelength.
An architecture built entirely from the friction of human vulnerability.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to turn this directly to you, the listener. I want you to look at the people in your own life through the lens of this linguistic map. Who in your circle has willingly hacked through the dark, thorny brush of the forest by your side?
Who chose to stay when the path became impossible?
And think about those moments of effortless clarity. When did you instantly recognize a kindred spirit where the static simply vanished and you didn't have to explain yourself?
This raises an incredibly important question, however. A final thought I want to leave you with, drawn directly from extrapolating the logic of our source material today.
Oh, I love when we push the text to its limits. What is the question?
Well, our sources were adamant in their foundational thesis that relationships are essentially exercises in assessing risk, right?
Right.
The text explicitly states that bearing your soul means handing someone the literal, tangible power to destroy you.
You hand them the loaded weapon. Yes.
So if building genuine, profound trust actually requires us to abandon the safety of arm's length and demands that we take a completely unprotected leap of faith into the dark, does this fundamentally mean that true intimacy is entirely dependent on the ever-present, lingering threat of betrayal?
Wow. Let me process the physics of that for a second. You are asking if the danger itself is the actual required ingredient for the closeness.
Exactly. Follow the logic. If someone did not possess the absolute power to leave you high and dry, or if they were physically incapable of pulling the rug out from under you, would their loyalty of staying through thick and thin actually possess any moral or emotional value?
If a machine is programmed to never hurt you, it doesn't love you.
Right.
If a person literally cannot hurt you, their choice not to hurt you is meaningless.
Perhaps the true, profound beauty of finding a kindred spirit isn't that you have miraculously found a magical fortress where danger does not exist.
Yeah.
Perhaps the beauty is the mutual, daily, terrifying decision not to pull the trigger of the weapon you have willingly handed to each other.
That reframes the entire concept of vulnerability. The danger isn't a flaw in the system. The danger is the entire point.
The shared acknowledged risk is exactly what makes the music on that 99.5 FM wavelength sound so impossibly sweet.
That is a staggering thought to mull over on your commute or your next walk. Thank you all so much for joining us for this deep dive into the architecture of trust. We hope this linguistic toolkit gives you a totally new way to map your own emotional landscapes.
Keep observing the boundaries, keep questioning the mechanics, and keep exploring the connections around you.
And when the data runs out and the person standing across from you is finally worthy, don't be afraid to bend your knees and take that leap of faith in the dark.